Hey everyone, welcome to an episode of SlashU. In this week's episode, Nick and I decided to do a little something different. We sat down and interviewed Jeremy Sumrall. Jeremy was the beast when we watched 2009's Sweatshop. Plus, he's done tons of other great stuff. So we interviewed him for an hour, and here it is. Take a listen.
Welcome to Slash U,
Yeah, welcome to SlashU,
Jeremy.
Jeremy. Thanks for being here.
Howdy, thanks for having me.
Hey, I honestly, I'm not gonna lie, brother. I feel like I'm talking to royalty.
I feel like I'm talking to an old friend.
Yeah.
I promise I still pick up my dog's poop like everybody else, so all good.
Some people don't. There's a special place in hell.
I tell people that that's how I stay humble, is that, just because I've done a lot of cool shit in my career doesn't mean that I don't still pick up my dog's poop. So
Yeah, that's an interesting instead of the pant leg one at a time thing.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
No,
great.
it's like it's
Great.
pet poop will humble you quicker than anything.
I agree.
So
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
thanks for having
Texas, right?
yeah. Yeah. Texas.
Nice.
The great, yeah, I can't even say that anymore. The great state of Texas.
Great.
I'm so over the state, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just like what part of Texas are you in?
I'm in a tiny, tiny, tiny little town, about an hour north of Houston.
Okay.
Basically, if you've ever heard of Huntsville, that's where we kill all of the death row inmates.
Oh.
So that's technically
you-
Huntsville is where I currently live, but I grew up in a tinier town,
Okay.
about 15 miles south of Huntsville, which is no one ever knows where New Waverly is. So I just tell them I'm from Houston because that's the closest metropolitan area.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're familiar at all with Quentin Tarantino films,
Yes.
Kill Bill,
Never heard
Yeah.
of that.
Buck, my name is Buck and I like to fuck. He said that he was from Huntsville, I think, Texas.
All
and,
right.
and Richard Linklater is from Huntsville, and so like Dazed and Confused was actually based on his experiences in Huntsville.
That makes sense. Small town Texas.
Yeah.
Um,
So, and Huntsville is a fairly, I mean, it's not a large town by any stretch of the imagination. It's like 25,000 people or something. The town I grew up in was about 900 people.
Okay.
And that's informed pretty much everything in my life and career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're traveling a lot. You travel a lot, I'm sure, with some of not only as an actor, producer, director,
Mhm.
writer. I mean, all of it. So, I mean, do you spend time between the West Coast? I noticed like Vegas.
I do. I have Vegas and LA on my website because I do have little pockets of people that I work with in both. And the plan at some point is to move out west. And it would have happened before now had it not been for a series of calamities.
Oh, sure.
Especially, COVID. Obviously that set a lot of people back. But yeah, I'm based in Texas, but I travel not as often as I would like. But like I was in Pennsylvania last winter to film a series of music videos for this deathwave band called the Russian White, and actually the first of the 3 videos just dropped like last week, I think. And we've got 2 more coming out. The next one hits in like a couple of weeks, and then the third one will hit after that. I've just got to put a button on that and send it over. So I was in Pennsylvania for that. I'm going to be in Ohio in just a couple of weeks for Horror Hound Weekend. I have a screenplay that's in competition there.
Oh, cool.
And then God, I'm so bad about my schedule and like looking at my calendar and knowing where I'm going to be when. I know that I've got other stuff coming up, and I've been to LA in the last year. I've been probably twice, and before that, it was probably like every couple of months I was out in LA.
Wow.
And Vegas as well, because like I said, I've got people in both places. Actually, in Vegas and LA, we have a group of filmmaker friends who all work on each other's stuff fairly often. And actually now we're looping in Ohio.
Yes.
Because Roman Jossert, who directed Plastic Park, and he starred in Don't Fuck in the Woods.
We just
We just watched
y'all just
that.
interview
We
him?
just watched that.
Oh, you just watched
today.
Okay.
We're going to record
don't
that
fucking-
We're
episode.
recording that episode
Okay.
today.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Roman came down and was my gaffer for this proof of concept that we shot not too long ago. I mean, it was a while ago now, but that is actually supposed to be my third feature that we're still trying to kind of get rolling. But he came down and was my gaffer, and my buddy Tyler, who lives in LA now, who was actually in my first film. He was one of the first actors I cast in my very first film as director. That's a whole messed up story because he lived literally miles away from me. And again, I live in a tiny town, and at the time I lived in an even tinier town, and he lived just a couple miles from me, and that was crazy. But Tyler is based in LA now. He just worked on Beverly Hills Cop 4. He was Joseph Gordon-Levitt's stunt double, and he and I have known each other for years. And he introduced me to these guys with this group called Ismahawk, who are based out of Vegas. They did I don't know if you guys are familiar with the web series Death Battle, where they basically take characters from like Marvel and DC, and they hire actors and stuntmen, and then they make them fight. It's essentially like a live action Mortal Kombat almost. And so the Ismahawk guys were behind Nightwing versus Daredevil, and Red Hood versus Winter Soldier. And I'm telling you guys, you've got to check these out. They're absolutely insane. The action is intense, and it's just awesome. And so Tyler had gotten hooked up with the Ismahawk guys through those because he played Daredevil in the Nighthawk versus Daredevil, and then he played Winter Soldier in Red Hood versus Winter Soldier. And he introduced those guys to me for this proof of concept, and we all showed up on set together. We had like a couple of Zoom meetings, but we had never physically met. And we showed up on set and had 6 days of just absolute insanity. And I had brought Roman down from Ohio to be my gaffer. Through that, Roman got hooked up with the Ismahawk guys, and come to find out, he'd already been a huge fan of theirs. He didn't know that that's who was working on this project. He happened to be talking about DC Comics and how much he loved Batman and stuff. And they were like, well, you know that we did Nighthawk versus Daredevil and Red Hood versus Winter Soldier. And he was like, wait, hold the fuck up. He was like, do you know that I'm like one of the biggest fans of that shit? They had no clue. And so they wound up meeting because of that. And then the Ismahawk guys wound up working on Placid Park with Roman. And so it's just like this crazy, weird, incestuous family of filmmakers that we got going on. And now I'm working with guys in Pennsylvania as well. Thomas Reimer, who is the front man for the Russian White. He's going to be doing music for me on this feature. He's also going to be playing a role in it. And he hired me to do their new music videos, and now he's directing a film. And I'm sure I'll probably wind up working on that in some capacity. And I'm trying to hook him up with the guys in Ismahawk and Roman and all of them. So yeah, it's just this weird, crazy, incestuous group of crazy ass filmmakers.
Yeah, we noticed that like in pockets, like you said, when you mentioned Ohio, of course, Ohio has just been a great scene. Of course, the classic Thanksgiving, and then of course Fuck in the Woods, which we're about to go notice Texas as well. And that was kind of like my question to kind of lead in. I know like we of course got to know us, Andy and I, through still one of my favorite, like when I say like people are like, what's a movie we need to watch? I go Sweatshop.
Recommended it on
Stacey Davidson, I know, is the writer, director of that, but I noticed you guys also worked on Urban together. Like, so I know, how did you get called in to play this beast?
That's one of my favorite stories. So at the time before Sweatshop was even a thing, I think Stacey might have been in the writing stage, pre-production, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
He had the premiere of his last film before that, which at the time, when I knew it, it was called Necrophobia, but he had changed the name to Domain of the Damned just before the screening. And it just so happens the screening happened to be on my birthday. And so I went to this screening. Stacey and I think we casually knew each other through MySpace at the time. And that dates us. And so I went to this screening, and I'll be honest, and I've told Stacy this story a million times, and he's fine with it. I expected it to look like someone had spent $5 on it in somebody's backyard on high 8 or something. And instead, it was actually really slick and looked expensive. And that blew me away, because I was like, this is a guy who is essentially from my area, and he's making films like I would want to make. Because at the time, I had taken a couple of screenwriting classes around the time I was 25, but had really no inclination as to what it would take to make a film. Even though Robert Rodriguez, Richard Linklater, and those guys were making films in Texas, I didn't have the connections back then. So I started a memorabilia company so that I could go to conventions, meet other horror fans, and kind of work my network that way. And that's how I wound up connecting with Stacy on MySpace. And then I went to his screening. A couple months later was the second Texas Frightmare weekend. And Stacy was going to be there promoting Domain of the Damned. And at the time he had, I think it was the Houston Filmmaker Organization is what he called it at the time. And he invited me out to one of their events, actually asked me to sponsor it. And so I came out and was sold some of the stuff that I peddled at various conventions, and we just struck up a friendship. And I remember we had a discussion / argument about Rob Zombie's Halloween at the time.
Oh,
And okay, Nick started.
Yeah, because I was very pro, and several of them were very anti.
I'm a pro guy.
And so at the time I was just like, man, just meeting other filmmaker friends and like fans of film is just cool to me, because again, I started my memorabilia company to do that. Mm-hmm. And so around that time, I was kicking off my memorabilia company. I'd done a photo shoot with Christy, who did the effects for Sweatshop. And every time I would go to one of these mixers, people would ask, like, when are you going to direct something? And I'm like, I'm not a director. I consider myself more of a writer. But that October, Stacy was about to start filming Sweatshop. And I was at one of the mixers with him, and he said, are you going to come to set? And I said, look, man, all I need is an invitation. Like, I don't want to just show up. I'm not that guy. I don't, show up where I'm not wanted. But if you want me to show up and you invite me, I'll be there. And about a week later, he messages me on MySpace, and he says, hey, have you ever thought about playing a masked killer in a slasher movie? And I said, no bullshit, pretty much every day since I was 6. And he said, all right, cool. And then I didn't hear anything for like a week. And I was like, is he fucking with me? Like, is he seriously going to offer me this chance to be a killer or what?
Dangle the carrot, and then, yeah.
Yeah. And so I wound up having a phone conversation with him a couple days later. And he was like, yeah, man, I'd love to send you the script and get you involved. And I'm like, all right, cool. And so I read the script. And if any of your listeners have seen Sweatshop, there's one scene in particular that when I read the script, I was at my computer desk and I pushed away and went, no. And it was the ball gag scene.
Yes.
Yes. God. So at that moment,
because that's what we said, literally a ball gag.
It's literally a ball gag. Yeah. It's literally a ball gag. And I literally pushed away and I was like, they're not seriously going to fucking do this, right? But I was in. I was like, you know what? This is exactly what I can sink my teeth into. It gets my feet wet. It gets me in the door, to making movies. And so a week after that phone call, I was getting the back of my head cast for the latex mutated head thing. And then a week after that, I was on set, not filming at first. I showed up just to kind of introduce myself to the cast and stuff. And I remember sitting on set, and there was a little HD monitor, because at the time, we're talking, this was 2007. So HD cameras, like on the prosumer level, were just kind of getting traction. Mm-hmm. And I saw the monitor and what Stacy was shooting, and I was like, holy shit, this looks like a real movie, like without any kind of post-production, obviously, or anything. And I was like, man, this is something. And so the week after that, my very first day on set was the rave scene when I was splattering all. The very first thing I shot was me stomping into the crowd and swinging the hammer. Now, mind you, I had not put on the entire costume until just before we shot it, and I wear glasses, and I'm fucking blind without my glasses, and I could barely get my glasses under the welding mask. And even when I could get them under the welding mask, the humidity fogged up my glasses anyway. Yeah. So I was blind as shit.
That's
when I'm on set. And okay, so the hammer itself is this giant piece of PVC pipe, and it's foam rubber on the end. The anvil obviously is foam rubber. But it was still a good 20, 25 pounds.
Sure.
And the PVC pipe is a good 3 or 4 inches in diameter. And even though it's hollow, it's heavy, and it's very cumbersome. And I was wearing these huge thick welding gloves. Yeah. So I had like no grip. And so I'm like trying to like just demolish people.
Yeah.
And I'm losing my balance. And I'm like, it's a disaster. I'm going to get fired, And he wound up saying like, man, this is the coolest shit we've done. Like, and I was like, cool, I'm good.
Yeah. It's the most interesting outfit from like, to the mask to the, usually to someone wearing like a janitor's outfit. I mean, I was like, this guy looks like, I got a, pimp jacket on. Like,
yeah. And so the funny thing about the wardrobe, a lot of it, I mean, the furs were not me. The welding mask was not me. That was stuff that Stacy had ideas for before that. And like, I don't know if it really shows on film that well, and especially because it's been a long time since I've seen it, but there's actually a dog skull in the furs. It's not a legit dog skull. We did not kill any dogs. It was made, but, there's a dog skull. The furs themselves were not legit furs either. They were, store-bought or whatever.
Sure.
But the coveralls, I provided, the boots I provided, the welding gloves. Actually, the welding gloves were legit. They were welding gloves that we worked with at my day job. And so that the grease that's on there is absolutely 100% legit grease from work. And the scene where I stick my hand in Lolly's mouth and rip her jaw off.
Yes.
My dick shot.
She nearly vomited. She nearly vomited because I stuck my hand in her mouth, and those welding gloves had that funk.
Real.
Plus, we shot it in October, but October in Texas is very hot, and we were under hot stage lights, and we couldn't have AC, and the places that we were in did not have AC. And so every day after shooting, my costume was just fucked. It was just drenched in sweat and grime and everything. But the day we started shooting my stuff, I had already taken the coveralls. Thankfully, at the time I was married. Not thankfully I was married, because that's a whole messed up story.
Different podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And believe me, I've got stories. But my wife ripped the down lining out of the coveralls, and I'm glad she did, because they were still miserably hot without that. But I then took the coveralls and I rolled around in them in like a pile of ash, and dragged them behind my car and ran over them and like threw them in just anything to make them look gross.
Mm-hmm.
And then the day we started shooting, Christy, the effects artist, and myself took the furs out to the parking lot of the place we were shooting. And there was like this huge kind of just like a pothole, but it had been filled with water. And so we just like dunked the fur in there and like got mud on it and just made it gross. The one thing I did not do, and I was going to, and I'm glad I didn't, I really wanted to be repulsive to these people that I was having to kill. And so, if anyone's a hunter or a fisher, you can go and buy raccoon urine,
sure,
and catfish blood, and I had bought a bunch of this stuff, and I was just gonna smear it all over my costume. Holy fuck, am I glad I did not do that?
Yeah,
because that would have been really bad. I mean, as it was, every day after shooting, because we shot on the weekends, because we had no money, and again, hot as balls in October, in hot locations, no AC. I would sweat so much into the coveralls, and all I was wearing under there was boxers. Like I could not wear anything else because it was just so miserable. But I would sweat into the clothing, and then at the end of the day, I would ball the clothing up, throw it in the garbage bag, and let it ride around in my van the whole next week.
Oh God.
And then I didn't think about it that first week. When I went to shoot the second week, I opened up that trash bag.
Yeah.
And the smell,
smack you in the
just
face.
like I could not get it out of my nostrils. It was so disgusting. So I got to where I started bringing Febreze air freshener with me and just spraying the costume before we shot. And one of our PAs, Kristen, actually said, "Man, you smell like death and fruit." And I almost named my production company Death and Fruit. And like I even had a logo made up with like a Grim Reaper, and instead of the side, that was literally a banana. You know, and
that's smart.
I just didn't stick with that name, but that was one of the funniest.
Yeah,
that was the funniest things.
Pass that up. Well, real quick too, because these are just two follow-ups, but like they're quick. I guess I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but why the name Sweatshop and who? I really want to know this because I would love to know a backstory of the Beast.
So
like the Beast characters, but I also didn't know the two girl characters. They reminded me of the Ring.
Yeah, that was a Stacy edition. So the story that I've become familiar with, and I could be incorrect on it, but this is what I was always told. The original writer, Ted Gagan, who went on and directed We Are Still Here with Barbara Crampton and Andrew Stensenig, and also recently directed Brooklyn 45. Like he's a writer director of, of what pretty well renowned in the indie scene up in New York. But he had been hired. This is my understanding that he had been hired to write a series of what they call Gorno films for Hustler, literally horror porn.
Sure. And
so he wrote, a stack of these films, and one of them was Sweatshop. Now I don't know where the title came from, but my understanding is that the original script was pretty much just 45 pages of sex and the occasional kill. And then that was one that Hustler didn't buy for whatever reason. And so he retooled it into what eventually became the Sweatshop that we know. And Stacy and Ted had become friends somehow. And one day Stacy was looking for a project and Ted had Sweatshop. And so Stacy kind of put his own, stamp on Sweatshop. And then the rest is history, really. But as far as Sweatshop, like the name, I'm not sure. I could always say it's because it was an entirely sweaty set, but but the girls, the Ghoul Girls, we call them on set anyway. I don't know where Stacy's inspiration. I mean, obviously it was like a Japanese kind of bent to it, and I think he was just trying to make something a little stand out a little differently from other slasher films, and that always got us attention. But it's funny because like I was never on set with them at the same time. And in fact, there's four different women playing the girls.
Yeah.
Because actually Ash Kay, who played Charlie, my final girl, she was one of the Ghoul Girls.
Yep.
Crystal Freeman, who played Lolly, was one of the Ghoul Girls.
Yeah.
Miko Marie, who has sadly passed on, she played the face of the Ghoul Girls. And like any of the close-ups, that's Miko. And
passed away.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've lost a couple of people from Sweatshop.
Oh, man.
We lost Miko and one of my very good friends, Danielle, who played Kim.
Miko was in. We did Spirit Camp too.
So that's Julin, who was in Spirit.
Oh, Miko's the character.
So Julin played Miko, but there was an actress by the name of Miko Marie who played the face of the Ghoul Girls.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, and from my understanding is that that's where Stacy may have gotten the name Miko was from Miko Marie.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, Miko passed away a few years ago. Danielle did as well. And Danielle was a crushing blow for me because she was the first individual cast member that I worked with on Sweatshop.
Mm.
And she was also, I mean, just a fucking amazing woman. I mean, she was one of my best friends. She was actually in my first film as director, Possum Walk. She was in my second film as director, Pickaxe. She was just, she was the best. And in fact, not long before she passed away, I had been going through some really tough shit, and I hadn't talked to her at that point in a few months, and she just randomly texted me. And she said, just checking on you, bud, worried about you, love you, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of told her what was, kind of fucking with my head. And she basically just told me to keep my head up. And little did I know that she was going through some really tough shit at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just the kind of person that she was, because here I am whining about whatever problems I had at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she was going through some shit, and she was more concerned about me. And I'll never forget one of the first things she ever said to me, when the scene where I've got her strapped to the table and I'm cutting her fingers off. And that was one of the first.
Brutal.
That was literally one of the first things that I shot. We shot the rave scene first, but then the next day was when I worked with Danielle solely one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And every time Stacy would call action, Danielle would just fucking freak out, I mean, in character, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to grab her wrists and just slam her to this table. And we're talking, this is a real wooden table. And I'm just slamming her down. And every time Stacy would call cut, I immediately would come out of character and say, like, hey, are you okay? Like, did I really hurt you? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And she'd look at me and laugh and say, just make it look good, dude.
Nice.
And that has stayed one of my mottos. Just make it look good.
Yeah, because that was my, like, we call them dick kill shots.
Yeah.
And that was mine, because I mean that was the most brutal. I mean, especially like when because I was like, she's not dead. She's still crawling away. The legs. Oh my god. I mean, there were so many. Just like it's.
I rewatched it the other day to refresh my memory on this.
Yeah, I've not seen it in a very long time. Because it obviously would be bittersweet for me, because it's the same reason why I can't really watch Pickaxe either, because Danielle is such an integral part of that film. That it's just kind of, it casts a pallor on it, because I just remember, obviously I remember the good times, and there were a lot, Danielle was just the fucking best.
Yeah. I feel like Pickaxe would be something that would fit our podcast very well, but
I mean, it's
how we can watch it.
So the distributor had it on Amazon Prime for a while, and it's bounced around. I know it was on Tubi for a while. I know that there are DVDs that exist of it, because I still have a stack of them. And in fact, as soon as I dig them out, I'll send you guys one. It's fine.
Nice.
But yeah, I think the DVD is out of print now. I'm not real familiar with the distribution side of Pickaxe, for various reasons. But that was 100% a love letter to slasher films for me.
For sure.
Number one, I came up with the idea for it before we ever shot Sweatshop. I actually, during those mixers I was telling you about, when people would ask me, when are you going to direct something? I remembered something that Robert Rodriguez had said about, saying that you're a filmmaker. Like, don't say you want to be, don't say you're an aspiring filmmaker. You're a filmmaker.
You are, yeah.
Print up a business card and go make a film. And he said that everyone has 10 to 20 horrible films in them. So go get them out of the way as soon as you can. And I mean, and I had done stuff with my kid's sister and friends and stuff when I was growing up, but nothing serious. So when we were doing these filmmaker mixers and people kept asking me, when are you going to direct something? The thing that I kept coming back to is, well, I've never directed anything. I haven't directed a short, haven't directed a music video, a commercial, anything. So if I'm going to have the balls to jump off into the deep end without even checking if there's water, I need to come up with some kind of something that I can fall back on and say, like, well, that's the reason. And I thought, well, if everybody says that the first movie in a series is the best, then maybe I should make one that's like 2 or 3 in.
Perfect.
Then I can fail and it won't matter.
Right.
And
it was a sequel. Yeah.
yeah, and it was supposed to the original title of it was The Pickaxe Murders Part 3, the final chapter.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And actually the original title was something completely different, which is a whole other story. But when I eventually settled on The Pickaxe Murders Part 3, the final chapter, I started writing it with the idea that it was the third part in a trilogy that never existed. And so my thought was, this is a film that was made in the 80s, and it sat on the shelf and people kind of forgot about it, and then it's been unearthed. But the plan was always to have flashbacks to part 1 and part 2. And unfortunately, we never really quite got to pull that off. And then once distribution got a hold of it, and we were finished with it, distribution got a hold of it, they changed the title to Pickaxe because it was confusing to people. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I also say that it's still confusing because there are a lot of people that reviewed it as Pickaxe and said that it was a sequel to The Pickaxe Murders Part 3. I'm like, no, it's the same film. It's just a different title. So that became a whole thing. But it allowed me to throw people off when we were doing auditions, because I would ask them a series of questions about, like, are you aware this doesn't really pay anything? Are you comfortable with nudity? Are you comfortable with sexual situations? Blah, blah, blah. And then the last question I would ask them is, have you ever seen The Pickaxe Murders Part 1 and 2? And that was always a test, because if they said, oh yeah, they're my favorite, I'd be like, that guy's a bullshitter. I don't know.
People would lie. Yeah.
I can't believe people would say that. Like,
oddly enough, nobody fell for it except one person.
Okay.
The entire time we were doing auditions, everybody was like, I'm not real familiar with it. I'm sorry to say that I haven't seen the first 2. And I'm like, you know what? It's cool. So there was somebody who said, I think I've seen the trailer for one of them. And I'm like, no, you didn't. Nope. No, you didn't. So that was, I thought, oh, that's genius. Everybody's going to fall for that shit. Nope. Nobody really fell for it. And that the way that came about, Pickaxe. So I came up with the idea before we shot Sweatshop. Went and made Sweatshop, and then I went and made my first film called Possum Walk, which no one has seen. In fact, I don't even have a copy of it. Wow. And when it was time to do Pickaxe, I'd gone off and I'd produced Jacob with Stacy and this guy Larry Wade Carroll, and I think it must have been a time when I wasn't really working on anything much at all. And I was trying to kind of get the things going, back going. And I did a photo shoot with a couple of lady friends of mine. And one of the photos that we did was a takeoff on the poster for Slumber Party Massacre. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to have a pickaxe. And so I was like, all right, let's do the pickaxe instead of the drill. Everybody knows that infamous poster, right? Yeah. Where it's between the guy's legs and there's a drill and there's women looking up. So we did a take on that. And so I was like, okay, I'll call it The Pickaxe Murders. And then I was like, but okay, this will be The Pickaxe Murders Part 3, the final chapter. And that tied into what I was working on script wise. So we did that photo shoot, and I kind of put it in a drawer and forgot about it for a minute. And then I met a guy by the name of Mark Schoenbach, who is a poster artist who runs Sadist Art Designs. At the time, he had not really done many like legit movie posters. He had done a lot of mock-ups. And I think that he had done a poster for this guy, Frank Sabatella, in New York for, oh God, the name escapes me now. It was a short film set around Halloween. And Mark had done that, and I loved the artwork. And so Mark and I became friends through Facebook, because by this point Facebook was a thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Mark had contacted me and said, "Hey man, do you have anything to work on? I'm just trying to get my portfolio going." And I said, "You know what? I've got these photos that I did for this photo shoot. I'll send them to you and see what you can come up with." And so he took that shot, the Slumber Party Massacre shot, and did his thing to it. And he's got that very 80s flavor to his art. And I told him, like, this is not a legit movie. This is just something that we did for fun. But here's the title: The Pickaxe Murders Part 3, the final chapter. And so he slapped that awesome logo on it. And that was that. I mean, I was just like, this is something cool for my, my archives and something for his portfolio. A few months later, he gives me a call and says, "Hey man, I got contacted by Fangoria magazine, and they want to do an article on my work.
Mhm.
Would you mind if I gave them the pickaxe artwork to kind of showcase in the article?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just so everyone's aware, it's not a legit movie. It's just something we did for fun." And I kind of forgot about that. And so months go by. I never heard anything more about this article. And my brother calls me up one night. And mind you, my brother never calls for any reason. So I was worried something was wrong.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, did you happen to get the most recent issue of Fangoria?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got it right here on my desk." He said, "Did you know that there's an ad for your film?" And I'm like, what is he talking about? And I thought, oh shit, he's probably talking about the article for Mark. That's great. Awesome. Cool. And he's like, no. There's an ad for your film. And I flipped through the pages, and sure as shit, there is a full 1 page of the Pickaxe Murders Part 3 poster artwork with no other details, just the artwork with the title. Wow. And I'm like, holy shit. We're talking, this is a full page in Fangoria. That is not a cheap sort of ad. It didn't say that it was just promotional artwork or nothing. It was just that page. And in fact, it's the issue of, I can't remember if it's the Exorcist on the cover or the Evil Dead remake on the cover. It's one of those two, because I've got them framed somewhere in this house.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
That's great.
And after that, I snapped a photo of it on Facebook, and I was like, holy shit, look, I've arrived. I'm in Fangoria, which at that point was like the 5th or 6th time I had been in Fangoria. But it's still, that's a fucking poster ad for my film, which did not exist at the time, mind you.
Yeah.
After that, my phone starts blowing up. Everybody's like, what's this film that you're working on? We want to see it. We like, distributors are emailing me, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're right in the thick of things. Like, just give me a minute. I had not even finished the script at that point. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I need to capitalize on this. So I blazed through a draft, and I had met Tiffany Shepis.
Adam Green.
And we had known each other through some convention appearances. And at one point, we had talked about working together on a sequel of another movie that never panned out. And so we just kind of kept in touch. And I thought, oh my God, if there is a role for Tiffany, I've got to put her in this if she's willing. And so I wrote the character of Adrian specifically for Tiffany Shepis, and she fucking crushed it. And it was a situation where I basically sent her the script. I was like, this is my thoughts. And she was like, I'm fucking in. And then we were off to the races. The only issue we had with casting her at first was when I wanted to film it, she hadn't told anybody, but she was about 7 months pregnant at that point.
Oh.
And so she was about to give birth to her son, Max. And so we pushed filming off until later in the year so that she could kind of recover from all of that. And and then we were filming her part in September of 2013. The film itself didn't come out until 2019 for various reasons. But I had also hooked up with a buddy of mine, Michael, who had directed Girls Gone Dead, and he had worked with Sal from the Howard Stern Show.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'd reached out to him just to kind of get an idea of, somebody to put in a cameo role. And he was like, man, you got to work with Sal. Just trust me on this. And I was like, can Sal even act? I mean, I had heard him on Stern because I was a huge fan, but I didn't think that this guy was going to be able to act, and other than act like himself. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, trust me, Sal is the guy you want on this thing. And again, I knew Sal as this buffoon on the Stern Show. And we cast him, We almost had Richard as well, but we were working non-union and Richard was SAG, so we couldn't, but I hooked up with Sal, and that was the best decision. Sal wound up being the absolute most professional, just coolest, humblest, with the best stories. We even wrapped him a day early, and we paid for him to fly home early, and we even paid him for the extra day. And he was like, no, 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 no. You guys do not owe me for this extra day. And I was like, no, no, no. You came and you crushed it. And we had to throw him a wrinkle. Unfortunately, as things happen, things went wrong with one of the actors that we were supposed to shoot with, a scene with Sal. And we literally had minutes to figure something out. And so I pulled him and the woman who was playing his wife. They had like a very contentious relationship in the movie. And his character was supposed to have a sex scene with another actress because he was cheating on his wife. Well, we had a problem with that actress. I forget specifically what happened, but so we lost her for the day. And so I'm immediately scrambling. And so I go to Sal and Kelly, the woman playing his wife. I'm like, guys, we need to quickly figure out a sex scene or something to do with you guys. You're going to have to improv. And they went away for 10 minutes. They figured out what they were going to do. I didn't even see it until we were rolling. And it wound up being one of the most talked about scenes in the movie. Particularly because Sal was just completely disgusting in it. And to the point where I had to tell my mom, like, I didn't write that. Like, I'm just saying this right now. Like, I'm sorry.
Wow.
Actually, when we had the premiere of Pickaxe, that was one of my things. I went down the list and thanked everybody who was there and the cast, the crew, and everybody who had made it happen. And at the end, I said, and Mom, I'm sorry. And so then we were off to the races. And that wound up being one of the most talked about scenes in the film. And it wound up getting me name dropped on Howard Stern. Because again, Sal had been with us for just a few days and then went back to New York. A few days in, Howard was making fun of Sal for wearing makeup and like getting things like, I don't know, Botox or some shit, and he was just busting Sal's balls. And he brought Sal in. He's like, why are you doing all this stuff? And it's like, you're going off and you're filming these roles for these low budget films. Like, why are you doing this? And Sal just keeps talking about how much fun it is. And Howard says, didn't you just get back from Texas working on some film? And he's like, yeah, this movie called The Pickaxe Murders Part 3, written and directed by this guy, Jeremy Sumrall.
Nice.
I didn't listen that morning for whatever. I think I had just kind of gotten out of the habit of listening. And somebody on Facebook says, dude, did you realize they just mentioned you on Howard Stern? And I was like, fuck you. And sure as shit, somebody posted it on YouTube. And I'm like, oh my God, if little 4-year-old, fourth grader me had known what my life would be, like his mind would fucking explode. And sure as shit, I wound up mentioned on Howard Stern, which is one of my favorite things to say. Like, when people ask, like, what are your coolest accomplishments? I'm like, I got name dropped on Howard Stern. People never believe me, but trust me, it's, and it hasn't really like panned out into anything big, but I could still say that I was mentioned on Howard Stern.
Yeah.
So
in your LinkedIn profile. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, I was once mentioned on Howard Stern.
That's great. I wanted to ask you real quick too about another movie that you've participated in that we covered was Axe Murdering with Hackley.
Yes.
And that whole Texas, crew down there, because those guys really jumped on our thoughts and to the point where they put like one of our a quote about the movie that Nick said on their Facebook banner, and I was like, these guys really seem like a lot of fun. So
and that's
a little bit.
That's another one of those situations where it's all who you know and being open to meeting everybody. So the guy who wrote Axe Murdering with Hackley, which at the time was called it wound up being Axe Murdering with Hackley when it got distribution, but it was called Fun with Hackley Axe Murderer or something along those lines.
Sure.
And the guy who wrote it, Garrett Hargrove, he and I had met, oddly enough, through Sweatshop again. Sweatshop had screened at so there's now a festival a convention in Houston called Houston Horror Film Festival. At the time we did Sweatshop, there was a group that called themselves Houston Horror, and it was not affiliated with these guys. They're, and those guys are great. It's, there's no bad blood or whatever. But there was a sort of convention, a film festival for a few days that Sweatshop played at for Houston Horror.
Mm-hmm.
And Garrett had written a rape revenge film called Cherry Bomb.
Oh yeah.
And Julian, who was in Sweatshop, was the star of Cherry Bomb.
Okay.
And so Garrett was at the screening of Cherry Bomb. I got to see it, and that's how Garrett and I met. I think we had probably known each other through Facebook at that point, but we physically met at that screening, and we just kind of stayed friends. I mean, he and I have written stuff together. Nothing that's gotten produced yet, and I say yet because there is talk. But Garrett had told me, a few years later that he'd written this script that was kind of like The Office meets Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really cool thing. Oddly enough, not too far removed from an idea I had. Mine just didn't have the Office aspect, but it did have the aspect of like real life slasher films.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, also very similar to what wound up being Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. And that's brain thieves are very much a thing.
Yeah.
But so Garrett had told me about this idea, and I thought it was hilarious. And I went out to Austin for the film festival is now called Austin Revolution, and it was called something else at the time, and the name escapes me. But I had just shown up to connect with people, and I knew that Garrett lived in Austin, and he found out that I was going to be in town. So he was like, hey, why don't you come and do this cameo in Axe Murdering with Hackley? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I hung out on set for a day. I don't even remember. I think Hard Knocks was the name they gave me or something. Yeah. And I don't even remember. I think my mask was the old crone mask or something.
Okay.
And I'm in like one or two shots really.
Sure.
But I hung out all day and met with, Trey, I think was the guy who directed it.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if that was before or after I had worked on Princess, which is a short film that Trey wound up being the DP on, I think. Again, this is all an incestuous I think we all work on each other's.
Crazy. You're gonna need a flow chart when you have them in it.
Yeah. It's definitely not a family tree. It's more like a French braid.
Oh, sure.
We're all kind of intertwined at each other's stuff. But you have to do that as an independent, no budget filmmaker. You have to call in all the favors. You have to be willing to work on everybody's stuff, whether you're a quote unquote lowly PA or you're the director, and I hate that mentality of a lowly PA. I actually had a situation on the set of Pickaxe where this guy I'd never worked with, who wanted to be an actor. I think I had already done all the casting for Pickaxe, or at least for whatever we were shooting at the time. And he wanted to just come and hang out on set. He was like, I'll be a PA, I'll be a grip, I'll do whatever. And I'm like, yeah, cool. We could use extra hands because, again, we have no money. Mm-hmm. So he showed up and he did a little bit of work. But when it came time for us to have a closed set because we were going to have nudity, I cleared everybody out. I'm like, look, I don't even really want to be on set. Like, I want to be at Video Village to give the actress space and make sure that she's comfortable, and I work with safe words and stuff. Like, if she says the safe word, we fly in a robe, we cut camera, all that stuff. And so when we called for a closed set, I could hear somebody kind of grumbling, like, oh man. And I'm like, whoever that is, I'm gonna fucking wring their neck. So later after we had wrapped, this guy came to me and said, hey, I just want to tell you how much fun I had. I hope next time you give me something important to do.
Ooh.
And I went, listen, motherfucker,
Ooh.
There is no one on set who is more important than anybody else. Everybody here is absolutely essential, from the director down to the PAs. Like, I cannot do this alone. I need every single person, and fuck you. You're never going to be on my set again. and I, kicked his ass away, and I deleted him from Facebook and everything, and I've never worked with him again.
Wow.
I will not name him.
Sure.
If people ever want to work with him and they ask me my experience, I will be honest. But that really could have. I'm not a violent person by nature, but that made me want to break his teeth.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important mentality to have.
Yeah.
Especially with the genre you're working in here. It's low budget, kind of a horror slasher. You need everybody, all hands on deck. Everyone's important.
And we're doing such fucked up stuff usually. Every time there's one of those things on Facebook that says, tell people what you do or badly describe what you do for a living. I'm like, I shoot people in the face and I make them do fucked up things on camera. That's what it is to be a filmmaker. You have to put people in these extreme situations that they wouldn't hopefully normally be in.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make sure that they're safe, not just from a stunt perspective, a physical perspective, but an emotional one, because you're asking them to tap into these very real, dark emotions, and asking them to be okay when we call cut. I mean, it's a very, I totally respect actors. Like the little bit of acting I did on Sweatshop, which was not much. I didn't have dialogue, obviously. But I still had to get into that mentality of someone who is literally brutalizing these people. And it was a little hard to shake at times. And so for them to be able to take whatever dialogue and frame of mind that they need to get to these fucked up places where they're screaming and they're crying and whatever, that takes a level of confidence and mental stability that I have the utmost respect for. I used to have to listen to Cannibal Corpse and stuff to get hyped up to brutalize these people, but then I could shut it off, and be kind of okay afterwards. But I'm talking about, we're asking people to, oftentimes these movies have simulated rape or simulated sex, even is a little uncomfortable to ask somebody to do on camera. And you have to have grace and respect and treat them with kid gloves. You have to make sure that they understand they are safe, and ultimately they're the ones in control. It's just like kink and BDSM. The reason why you have safe words is for that reason. And so whenever we do really truly fucked up shit on camera, I always make sure that we have those talks that we're going to do some fucked up shit, but we're going to be okay. Go ahead.
No, I was saying I fully agree, because I mean, we just, not to self plug, but just everything you're saying has been so true to it. Hits home, because I wrote and just recently directed a short film called Murder Cabin, and it's in post now. But Andy,
I was in it.
He plays a deranged. He plays a not a good man, and so the wife, she who is an actress in Chicago, Sydney Moody. We got some crazy shit out of her when they were in a very fucked up scene where he's kind of
wearing this leather jacket and some nipple clamps and
sexual. I mean, but it's like, but we got the reactions out of her. But again, it was like you said, when you said kid gloves and soft and like hugs, it was like, getting all of this stuff out. Like I had a couple actors, because there's only 4 actors in the movie, but the teenage daughter broke down at one point when she gets killed. So it was, but I've known him. I've known this teenager. He was a little girl, so I told her, and so it was like you said a lot of really important, stuff that I feel like coming from you, I feel like we did it right.
Yeah, and my very first film, Possum Walk, one of the first things we shot was a rape scene. And I wanted to get that out of the way. I was like, this is going to be a tough scene to get through. We've got to just get it out of the way and then move on. Ultimately, we wound up cutting it from the film, which I had misgivings about, because I was like, man, we went through all that traumatic shit to put it. But ultimately, it didn't really serve the story the way I wanted it to. It demonized the man doing it too far, because this was supposed to be a guy who was on a downward spiral into hell, but he needed to have his redemption moment. And I was like, if we have him do this, the audience is never going to forgive him. So we had to cut it. But when we shot it, we shot it in such a way that there wasn't really anything explicit. You knew what was happening, but we did a lot with shadows and camera angles. The the two actors on set and myself and my DP were the only people around. I think we had one of our female producers to make sure that there was more women on set to make our actors comfortable. And when I called cut, you could have heard a pin drop because of what we had just shot. And we had already decided ahead of time, whenever we call cut, we're all going to leave. We're going to go have lunch. We're just going to break. And there was a nearby restaurant within, I don't know, 50 feet or something. And myself, the actress, and my DP all walked to this restaurant and did not say a word. And we wound up sitting at the table for a good 20 minutes without looking up, without talking or anything.
Sure.
And my DP finally breaks the silence and says, "We did not make a mistake." And I said, "Okay, we're good." So after that, we were all kind of able to relax and share, in some levity after that, because, that sort of scene, I've gotten shit about shooting that sort of stuff before, and I get it. Not everybody's interested in seeing that level of violence, but the truth of the matter is the world is fucked up, and our movies are just reflections of the world, and it's how we deal with this fucked up shit. And I don't take any sort of sadistic glee in shooting a scene like that, but you have to justify it. And I, did the best I could in justifying the level of violence that I portray in my films. Ultimately it's fantasy. It's not real life. Yes, we do fucked up things on camera, but it's just our way of therapy,
Yeah.
Sure.
And so those types of scenes, like I personally don't really want to have rape scenes in my films anymore. Not that I ever wanted to necessarily, but I thought sometimes that's kind of needed to portray just how evil somebody is.
Yeah.
But me personally, I don't really care to do those anymore. Number one, I feel like I'm trying to get away from some of the ideas that people have about my films. I don't want to just be seen as one type of filmmaker. As much as I love the boobs and the blood, and I've made a name for myself in being that kind of filmmaker, that's not all I want to do. So that sort of thing, I'm not really comfortable with doing so much anymore, because I also think you could do so much more with suggestions anyway. But that being said, like, the boobs and blood films are really fun to make. The rape scenes, not so much.
No.
Those are ones that I need a bath after participating in something like that. Thankfully, I've never been on camera for anything like that. I've been adjacent enough. And hats off to the fucking men and women who participate in those types of scenes and are able to come out on the other side. Some friends of mine, Ellie Church, Jason Crow, Scott Shermer, made this film called The Bad Man a few years ago, and very fucked up movie, very fucked up things going on, sexual violence and humiliation and all sorts of things. And all of them came out relatively unscathed on the other side, and they get it. Sometimes you have to portray the ugly side of life to prove to people that maybe life is not as bad as we think.
That's what I remember we did a film, The Last Horror Film from 1982, and the actress, but even in the film, was like, they're like, "What do you think about making films like this?" She's like, "Well, it's why, but this is what happens in real life. I mean, we're just showing it, and we're not the bad guys, so."
Yeah. Right. And I get so irritated when I hear people say that a film like a Serbian film has no artistic merit or whatever. And I'm like, I've actually never seen it. But I will fight to the death for its, for its existence, because it is a reflection of life, and we should be able to portray these fucked up dark sides of people, and not catch shit for it. When I forget, I think it was when I was casting for my current feature film that I'm in prep on. I had posted in one of the indie filmmaker groups on Facebook the types of roles that were available. And of course, a lot of it had to do with nudity and, this person is a stripper, this person is a hooker, and so on and so forth. But I'm making a very specific type of exploitation film. And this woman, who I call Random Jan, who her name is Jan, and she's on the internet. She actually said that your types of movies are the reason why the world is in the state that it's in. And I laughed my fucking ass off at that. Yeah. And so I actually turned that into a quote on some shirts. It says, Jeremy Sumrall's films are exactly why the world is in the state that it's in. Some Jan on the internet. And that, I mean, I had to just own that, but I'm like, the real world is 300 times worse than what we could put on film. It's horrendous, and we're only on this rock for a certain amount of time. And I'm going to do everything I can to either allow people to kind of purge some sort of, dark thought, or I'm going to entertain the fuck out of people. My job is to be an arbiter of taste or art or whatever. I get so aggravated when people say that there's no artistic merit in, certain types of films. I don't fucking care. If something is not my cup of tea, it doesn't matter. I will fight for its right to exist, because who's to say what is art and what's not? Right. It's all in the eye of the beholder anyway.
Yes,
Just because I don't want to watch someone fuck a baby doesn't mean that a Serbian film shouldn't exist. Just because I don't want to watch somebody eat a bunch of shit from somebody whose ass is sewed on their face doesn't mean
a human. I've heard of that movie. Yeah.
I think I've heard of that.
Same thing with Salo. Like I don't really care to see a bunch of aristocrats forcing people to eat shit, but hey, that movie has a right to exist.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, I think that is an excellent note for us to wrap up on, to be honest with you. I mean, I feel like
could go on for hours.
We could talk to you a long time. This has been really, really a lot of fun. I really thank you for doing this with us. And
I appreciate it, man.
What we'll do is this will be, an episode of SlashU for us, and we're just scratching the surface on YouTube. So we have video now, obviously, with this. Nice. So really,
as I say, shut up and make movies. And yet I'm on a podcast and I'm talking my fucking ass off.
Well, no, this is awesome.
Podcast report.
Is there any social media or other projects or anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
So like I said, right now I'm in prep on a new film. I've gotten hired to write or to direct a film called Hellfire in 2020. And it's gone through a number of configurations and permutations and stuff. And we're still in prep on it. We shot some stuff with the guys from Ismahawk, and we've got some things in the fire. The problem is it's a much bigger project than any of us really anticipated. So things are going slower than we had want. Again, we're working with no money. Right. We raised a little money on Indiegogo, and that's there. But it's not enough. It's not what we really, really need. Mm-hmm. And I've got, right now, there's a screenplay that I'd written called Another Night at Beavers, which is a film about strippers and lowlifes on Christmas Eve in a strip club that used to be a church that is being beset by these horribly demonic satanic snot monsters.
Wow.
And that is in competition at a number of festivals right now. It's a finalist at Horror Hounds Cincinnati, which again, that's where I'm going in a couple weeks to represent. It's also a finalist at Houston Comedy Film Festival. And
I had a script placed there.
Nice.
Oh yeah, nice.
That just started, for horror comedy. So that's a cool festival.
Nice. So there's that. And at some point, I'd love to make that. That actually, I wanted that to be my third feature, but Hellfire kind of got dropped into my lap instead. But excuse me. And I've also finished up a revenge script set in the world of opera called Vixen with a Vendetta, another project I've been trying to get off the ground for a number of years. Got a couple of short films in the works in various stages. I've got a 90s style psychological thriller about a cop with psychic abilities called Residue. That's in the scripting stage at the moment. And yeah, all of this information is out there on my website, which is jeremysumrallflickmaker.com. That's JEREMYSUMRALLFLICKMAKER.com.
Nice.
I also, like I said, I directed a trilogy of videos which all tell a story for this Deathwave group called the Russian White. The first video is called Funeral Art, which is on my website. It's on YouTube. It's, you know, it's a fucked up dark tale, kind of loosely based on Dante's Inferno in a way, about a guy who had lost his family, his wife and his daughter, and he's going through this dark spiral of like drug abuse and alcoholism and you know, the first part is his descent into madness. The second part is him really going kind of over the edge, and then the third one is really where shit gets crazy. And I'm really excited for that one to come out, but it's still a month or two out. And that'll be on my website. And my website has links to my Vimeo page, my YouTube page, all my social media. I'm on Facebook at Jeremy Sumrall Flickmaker. I'm on Instagram at Nothing Interesting Online, because that's the name of my company. It used to be First Week of Winter Films, which was based on John Carpenter's The Thing, because that's my favorite movie of all time. I recently rebranded to Nothing Interesting for various reasons. I'm also going to be launching a store before too long where we're going to be selling these Shut Up, Make Movies shirts. And that'll be linked on my website as well. That is Flickmaker Designs. I'm doing a number of products for that. I'm on TikTok occasionally. Like I have an account, but I don't really do a whole lot on there.
Okay.
And yeah, I've got a personal Instagram, the website, or the movie Instagram, and yeah, I'm out there. I mean, I'm on Facebook every day, you know, because I just doom scroll at my day job. You know?
Yeah.
I try to be entertaining, and I try to post shit that means something to me, you know. A lot of people just see me as this, you know, perverted filmmaker, and I am. That is part of me, but I'm also, you know, I don't want to say I'm a social justice warrior, but I do try to bring light, you know, to various causes to fight for, you know, and I've gotten a little political lately. And I'm very much fighting for the marginalized groups. You know, I'm very much for trans rights, and very for, you know, the LGBTQ community. I'm not necessarily in the queue, but I'm close enough.
Okay.
And I have, you know, a group of friends who are all in various marginalized sectors. So I would be an absolute fucking hypocrite if I didn't try and put my money where my mouth is and really fight for that sort of stuff. You know, because I mean, we have to. We're all on this rock together, and we're only here for a short period of time. And if we can't make it as enjoyable for ourselves and for the people that we love, then what's the fucking point?
Exactly.
So, amen, bro.
Amen, man.
Well, thanks a lot for doing this, and yeah, we'll link to your website for sure from this episode.
Awesome.
And I'm gonna try to look for the Beast Sweatshop clay figure that
clay guy. So actually, if you can see him, he's right here.
Yep.
Barry Crawford, clay guy. He fucking contacted us years ago to do one, and that is still one of the coolest fucking things to me, because I mean, who else can say that they've got a little clay figure of themselves, you know? I mean, obviously David Howard Thornton, Art the Clown, he's got one. And you know, obviously there's ones for Victor Crowley. Right. By the way, Victor Crowley kicking my ass, come on. You know,
Oh, yeah, that was ridiculous.
Oh!
We'll talk all about that later.
Okay,
Yeah.
believe me, I that was I'm I'm a beast fucking guy here.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Yeah.
that was
He's referring to our slasher.
yes,
business.
yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And
So
what's
we had to
funny is I love Kane. He's one of the best. And honestly, the Beast was very modeled on the Jason Voorhees
for sure
type of slasher. You know, I mean, if you look at my breathing, you know, in as the Beast, that is Jason in part 7. It's Kane hotter. So I gotta give him props, you know, and I love Victor Crowley, but you know, my ego is a little bruised that I got
recount.
taken out by.
We'll have another tournament next year. But thanks again, and really appreciate your time.
You're awesome,
absolutely, man. Anytime. This was great. I'm willing to do this literally anytime because I'm a whore. I'm just a media whore.
Right. Well, we'll keep in touch, and when we get some other projects wrapped and stuff, we'll talk again. Thank you.
Absolutely, sounds good, man.
Thanks, brother.
Have a nice day. We'll be in touch.
Shut up. Make movies.
Shut up. Make movies. Jeremy Sumrall. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.
Thank you.